I've used both. So I've used the tiers, I've used the baths, and I'm telling you right now, the tier level ones are just not your best practice. It's nice to have it in a bath because then you're not worried about, well, is the top level getting the same quality of a sonic machine as the bottom level? You know, there's so much conversations about all that.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
All right, clean freaks, welcome back to another episode of the Beyond Clean podcast. It is a good day on Beyond Clean today. We are announcing episode 1 of season 32. It has been too long. I'm excited to be back here in studio chatting with you all again. This season 32, is called SPD Fact Check. We are doing a little bit of fact checking on just some common practices in sterile processing that may have some knowledge gaps or some misconceptions hiding in them along the way. Of course, we could make that the theme for the rest of the Beyond Clean podcast and never run out of topics. So we're going to have to be choosy about the 8 that we pick for the season, but that's what we're going to be doing coming down the pike. I'm your host, Bobby Parker. It's great to be back with you. The first episode of this season, we are titling The Robot Whisperer, Clearing Up Confusions in Robotic Instrument Reprocessing. What better way to get the season started than to utter the words that send shivers down every SPD decontaminator's spine is robotics. There's a lot there. There's a whole lot that we could talk about from robotics, from workflow, from how to reprocess the things, from different types of robotics advances that are out there in the industry. And so to answer some of these questions, I wanted to bring in somebody who's doing a lot of robotics reprocessing. We're bringing in Jaime Amaya, Sterile Processing and HLD Manager out in California, who does a very high volume of robotics instruments. And fun tip or kind of peek behind the curtain, Jaime's going to be our guest co-host for the season, as we've been doing for these last couple of seasons. You're going to love her. It's been a lot of fun talking with her leading up to this episode, and I think this is going to be a good one. Hang with us, and we'll be right back with Jaime Amaya to talk about robotics.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
And joining us now in studio is Jaime Amaya, Sterile Processing and HLD Manager out in California. Jaime, I've been excited to get you on the show. Welcome to the Beyond Clean podcast. Excited to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Listen to you all the time. Yes, Jaime Amaya here from California. Been in sterile processing and high-level disinfection for 15 years. However, that's not where my career actually started 15 years ago. I was in logistics first. But when you learn to have to purchase instruments for sterile processing, you start to realize, well, this is intriguing. Why am I buying this? What does it even work for? And then you dive into the OR and they start asking you to purchase more. You just take a liking to it. So I transitioned and did a dual role. I managed the logistics of the OR, whether that was managing the surgeons themselves for all of their needs, capital purchasing, and then also sterile processing. So then I had to manage the competencies of high-level disinfection and not manage the people. That's even harder.
Huh.
But yeah, so it's been a long journey. I love both aspects of that journey because they do go hand in hand, but it's been real. My thing is just safe patient care. So I just want to make sure our patients are taken care of. We don't service them directly, but we do service them indirectly, and every life matters. So it's kind of what I live by.
Well, that certainly come across in all the conversations that we've had with you, Jaime. If folks aren't as plugged into Beyond Clean maybe as you are, and haven't been on some of the panel discussions or podcast episodes where we've had you on the show, why don't you give us a little bit more color on your role now? Like, what are you doing in the industry these days, and what do you like to do for fun?
Okay. So I do oversee 3 different campuses. I have 1 surgery center, 2 hospitals. There's a lot to take in, but it's rewarding for me to do the actual work that we do. Your name goes on everything, so I look at it as like I'm playing Tetris and then a memory game all in one, so takes me back to, you want to provide that level of care. My mom was in the hospital. She actually never made it out, but it changed my outlook on what gets involved in the hospital industry, even in healthcare. It's just a passion. It's just a passion. But I make sure that I teach everybody that passion, although most might not just, have it right off the bat. But I've been an SME for HSPA. I've done that for a couple of years, doing a lot of work with the CRCST exams. I've traveled to Ohio a few times working with Steris and learning the Steris equipment and kind of giving them support there. I've done my own conferences. So I am the president of SoCal Sterile Processing here in Orange County, greater LA. And a friend of mine and myself, we created this chapter, and we thought, how do we get greater LA and Orange County built together on a community of sterile processing to teach them all that we know and then what everybody else knows. So we started this. It's been a year now. Actually, this month, March, coming up, marks us our year of being part of a conference, and it's been exciting. Our conferences, we've actually done a virtual conference with Beyond Clean, but most of our conferences are in person, and we have over 100 and sometimes 150 people joining our conferences. So it's phenomenal, and all we want to do is teach. We just want to teach our knowledge, teach everybody else's knowledge, and unite us as a community, because we're all there to support each other. We can be battling healthcare versus healthcare, but why should we? I mean, we're all there to support each other and be one. So it's been such a great pleasure doing that. I really enjoy speaking, and I like talking and to teach people. So it's been really fun. On a personal note, I ride horses. I've been riding and training horses for 29 years. I have competitively barrel raced. I've competitively done team sorting and team pinning. So I've done a lot with my horses. I actually now have a 3-year-old coming 4-year-old that acts like a 3-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So and then another piece to me is I build Legos. So which is almost like building an instrument tray,
I'm catching a theme here, like Tetris you mentioned earlier, Legos. Yeah. I see how the organizational brains work.
Yeah. So it's, what? Ironically, building Lego sets and riding my horses, it just puts your mind at ease. So when you've got so much chaos going on in your brain from the day, it just kind of settles you and puts you at peace. But those are what I like to do outside of work.
I hear you. Well, hey, congratulations on the chapter. That's no small feat, particularly to have that kind of attendance a year off the ground. Like, you guys are doing great work out there. It'll actually be in the past by the time this episode releases. So yeah, great job back in March, back when that happened. So
back when.
That's right. Well, yeah, thanks for that introduction and giving us a chance to get to know you. Jaime is going to be our co-host for the season here on 32 on SPD Fact Check. And so I thought, what better way to get to know Jaime's voice and a little bit of her perspective than to have her be guest number 1 for the season. So I'm looking forward to talking about this with you. I titled the the episode, The Robot Whisperer. I hope you don't mind me granting you a
No.
title. But one of the things when Jamie and I were talking about what she's passionate about, what like area of sterile processing is kind of her niche that she wants to educate the industry on, she's telling me about the wild amount of robotics instruments that get processed at her facility. And so don't let me steal the thunder there. Like, can you give us a window into like just how much of robotic instrumentation you've had to get your arms around out there?
Yeah. So out of the 2 hospitals that we have, so as a whole, we have 12 robots. 2 of them we just acquired recently. And so out of those 12, 10 of them are housed at our bigger location, where the other 2 are at our smaller location. Just at our bigger location, to run those robotic instrumentation, we're processing, just with the arms themselves, we're processing well over 400 arms a week. And when you look at all the IFUs and everything, it's a lot of work. And I don't think a lot of people realize the amount of work that goes into any robotic instrumentation at all, like any of it. It's just so cumbersome and it's so time consuming. And you have to be able to stay on check and on point in all your processes, just because sometimes you don't even have enough instrumentation, because the procedures are just, they're getting great. The surgeons are getting great at their robotic surgeries and they're moving so fast. The time they can do a robotic surgery to the amount of time it takes to process something in decon, they don't match. Don't match. Yeah, yep. They can do a procedure faster now.
Yeah, I feel you. It's been a little while since I've been in decontamination and sterile processing, but I remember just the air being let out of you when you open the case cart and it's full of robotics instruments. Like, well, I know what I'm doing for the next hour.
Yeah.
So I guess the question that I wanted to ask here at the top of the call, talking about robotics instruments, we've been doing minimally invasive instruments for a long time. Ones that have complex cables that are running through it, little pulleys at articulating ends. So, Jamie, what is it about robotics instruments in particular that makes it so time consuming by comparison to, say, like a traditional laparoscopic minimally invasive instrument?
It's the IFU. It's just the processes. So not only are you going into a sink process, right? You have your 3-bay sink. Mm-hmm. You not only have to follow that process, but then there's so much flushing involved. It's simple, right? I take a laparoscopic instrument, I can clean it, flush it, get it into a sonic machine, I'm good. Whereas your robotic instruments are so robust that you have to flush it X many times. You have to get it into that port versus that port. There's dials that you have to get your flushing done as well. You have to make sure that everything's rotating. Then you have to then get it into a sonic machine. And now what sonic machine do you have? Does it do a thermal disinfection versus a non-thermal disinfection? The IFU says you have to have a thermal disinfection. So there's just from a traditional instrumentation, metal grade, German steel instrumentation versus a robotic arm, a robotic endoscope, a robotic camera, it's just the time that it takes to flush every avenue of that instrument and then make sure you're turning everything simultaneously to get it all functioning through its ports and making sure that it's going from the housing to the distal tip. It's time consuming.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a whole thing. And when it's that complex and time consuming, it introduces a lot of risk, right? Of somebody's going to miss a step or is going to get pressured to try to move through and maybe even skip a step. In decontamination, when there are so many steps that are time consuming and ports to flush and things to turn, is there anything that you do to try to make sure that everybody on your team is on the same page? Like, we're talking about a very large scale of robotics reprocessing. Like, how do you make sure that all those team members are cleaning all those robotic arms all the same way, the right way every time?
That's a phenomenal question, because I think that question can go whether it's instruments versus robotics, right? But yeah. There's a few steps that I put into place. First of all, I make sure we're all on the same page as far as an in-service. And then I have an educator. So my educator will teach just for robotic instrumentation. And we kind of hone in on that practice. So as new hires are coming in, we teach them that robotic practice outside of your typical instrumentation so that they are all taught the exact same way. And I do audits. So not only do my leaders, my supervisors and leads, do they help me do visual audits, I actually do video audits. So I do have cameras located in my department, and I will make sure I do a couple in decon for a week, but I'll do about 10 or so audits a month to make sure that everybody is following that process. And then it's back to an in-service if I see it deviate in any way, shape, or form, or if I see it's one person versus the whole team or whatever that looks like. But it's definitely going through an audit process. You have to, because you've got to make sure everybody stays on the same page.
I know a lot of people's ears perked up when you said cameras and decontam. Like that's not a very popular
It's not
a very popular choice in facilities. I also worked in a facility that had cameras in the ceiling, both as a technician and then as a supervisor, and in a different facility eventually as a manager. And the prevailing thought on it was always, like they're trying to catch us doing something we shouldn't be doing. But that at least at the place I managed, that was pretty much never how those cameras were used. It was like you're talking about, using it as a process investigation tool to be able to audit. Or if you have a quality event and something has gone wrong, it's like, well, we can go back and look at how the thing was processed and figure out, how this failure happened. It's like, the person stepped away and had to go answer the phone, and they came back and the thing happened while they were gone and they didn't know. Being able to have those kinds of contributing details are important. So I was just sticking up for your answer there a little bit, Jamie, because
I appreciate that. Yeah.
I don't think it's as Big Brother or, evil empire as what sometimes it looks like.
People's ears do perk and their eyes bug out, and it's truly an audit tool. Or like you said, a quality. So what if the OR has a quality event and I can say, well, yeah, let me give you some feedback on what we see versus what you see. So it's definitely meant for that, and it is utilized for that, because you have to be able to audit those type of things. If you're talking to them one-on-one, they can give you every answer in the world and know it's on point, but it's definitely audit based.
Another thing that you called out in the cleaning process that I want to go back to is the ultrasonic. There's a lot of conversation around ultrasonics, which ones you ought to use. And we're not being totally product specific here, so I'm not sure even if there is one answer to this, but when you're trying to pick out an ultrasonic for cleaning robotics instruments, will any old ultrasonic do, or is there something specific that you're looking for to have in your department?
It's specific. You definitely want, when you're doing as many as I do, you definitely want to look at, what's their cycle times? Because it varies. I've seen it from 10 minutes all the way up to 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. Okay, in that 10 minutes, what are you doing versus the 40 minutes, right? So you want to look at that. But at the same token, you have to look at the thermal disinfection. Because if that sonic machine doesn't do a thermal disinfection, which there are ones out there that don't have that, you then have to figure out a process of going into a washer, because your washers will have thermal disinfection. So it's really just understanding the IFU of your robotic instrumentation, because they do give oars. Like you can, when you're drying it, for example, they say you can use air versus a lint-free towel. But when it comes to that sonic and decon process, there is no oars. You got to get it done. So, but there is. Personally, a bath, a sonic machine that provides a bath with thermal disinfection is the key, personally. And I've used both. So I've used the tiers, I've used the baths, and I'm telling you right now, the tier level ones are just not your best practice. It's nice to have it in a bath, because then you're not worried about, is the top level getting the same quality of a sonic machine as the bottom level? There's so much conversations about all that.
Yeah. Yeah, we could talk about transducers and sonication.
Yes, we can.
We certainly could. And I imagine if you've got a sonic with those types of questions, like putting tests in various parts of that chamber, on different levels would be a good way to address that concern. Yep. But that's really important. The sonic does tend to get forgotten about sometimes, and the conversation around around thermal disinfection is important. I remember when we were going through getting our first robot at the facility that we were at in the IFU, that they actually didn't recommend automated washing for these instruments because it's difficult to rinse the detergent out of all the ports that it might get in if you didn't have some kind of a rack hookup, right, that's going to be plugged into those ports. And so they actually recommended that we program a cycle that was just the thermal rinse. So we do, right. Yeah, we did like all the manual cleaning, did the sonic, which ours did not have a thermal disinfection, and then went into the washer to get that thermal disinfection rinse. Yeah. So. Yeah,
because you definitely don't want to spend 40 minutes in a sonic and then another 40 in a washer, right? So yeah, we do have our washers programmed for thermal only.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Interesting stuff. All right. So now we're out on the clean side with these instruments. As you've been you've got a large sample size as you've been auditing this, what are the things out in assembly that folks tend to overlook? Like, are there any inspection points that you train to or kind of common gaffes and misses that you see out in assembly?
Yeah, so you have to have a magnifying glass. It is actually required in one of the IFUs to have that magnifying glass, and it's 10 times, so it's what I commonly see missed is that magnification. And I have to remind my teams, you guys, that's there to support you and help you. But it's then also understanding you got instrument air, right? And they tell you can dry with air or a lint-free towel. Some people want to force that air into those joints and gears, and you can actually blow an arm with just that forced air. If you're right up on that housing and you're trying to force that air through it, and somebody's not regulating the PSI of 30, you can actually damage a robot arm. So and then there's oil involved, right? So now you got to oil your joints, and you have to make sure that you're rotating your dials again so that you're moving all the joints of the robot arm, and it's circulating through those joints to actually then benefit the procedure. So I don't see my entire team, challenged. It's teaching it though, here's your magnifying glass, here's your oil, here's what needs to be done. Here's some key factors. Be careful with the air. But those are some things that a lot of people don't look. They don't look at how much forced air they're forcing through it, and they're just plugging away at it and not realizing that you can actually cause damage to an arm.
Yeah, I didn't realize that with compressed air being a hazard to the instruments. You say, blow an instrument arm out. It made me think of the insulated coating on there as well. Is there anything that you all do with the insulation testing of those? Because they're functionally minimally invasive instruments, and I've heard some people talk about the need for insulation testing with robotics, but there doesn't, at least what I've seen, doesn't appear to be much in the IFUs requiring that.
No, it's not needed. That outer housing of a robot arm is not actually, it's insulated, but it's a type of material, and I can't think of the name right now. It's almost, this isn't it, so don't quote me on it, but it almost reminds you of like fiberglass, right? But it is a different type of insulation on those arms where it doesn't require your full insulation tester like a laparoscopic instrument. But you do have to inspect it, right? Because any instrumentation can have damage. But, one thing I did discover through all of this is a borescope can actually, if you have the right borescope, can actually travel down a robotic arm from housing to tip. Yeah, it was pretty impressive. I actually just bought said borescope, and knowing that I can take it down port 1, because port 1 takes you all the way to your distal tip, whereas port 2 stays in your housing. But port 1 can take you all the way to your distal tip, and you can actually inspect the inside of a robotic instrument.
It's wild.
Yeah, it was super enlightening, and I was like, wow, that's impressive. Because you have to understand that your robotic instrument is still going in like a laparoscopic instrument. It's just a robot's, performing the procedure.
Yeah. You mentioned the magnification as well. I don't want to skip over that, because calling out that it should be 10x magnification is no small thing. Like most of those big magnifier lamps that are attached to the table, at least the ones I've seen, are only like 2.5, sometimes 5x. So does this 10x magnifier, is it that same form factor and just a different product, or do you have like a handheld magnifying glass? Or what do you do?
It's a different product. Yeah, we hunt and peck for the correct magnifying lighted that sits on, it's an arm, sits on your desk or your workstation. So we had to look, there's handheld ones, there's all kinds in the industry, but I always use the booms as my lighted magnification.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think hands-free is the way to go if you can.
Yeah.
But I thought that was worth calling out and underlining for folks to double check what it is that they have, because that's important. And part of that recommendation, like you said, is checking out to make sure that the insulation's not damaged, rather than having an insulation tester, looking at the distal end, but then also that shaft to make sure that it's in good shape. We are quickly running out of time here, Jamie, but I've got quite a few more that I want to try to squeeze in.
Go.
No, it's okay. So rapid fire here. How do you manage expired instruments? A lot of these arms are only good for a number of uses. And with that big a volume, I imagine you need a pretty smooth process. What do you do to take care of that?
Yeah, rapid fire. The OR sends it down. It turns red. So they send it down. My team then sends it to the window. We identify it with a leader, letting them know that this arm is now end of life. And then it is gone to our storage unit. We pull out that arm and put it back into circulation. And then I have somebody who manages the inventory of par levels of the unused robotic arms. SP, a little different. But yeah, for other robotic stuff, it's my team. The OR has to be involved. The OR has to send it down end of life. And then we acknowledge it from there.
And then you've got your sterile processing folks pulling the replacement one, and then somebody from supply chain restocking. Okay. What about storing individual instruments? Do you do any in peel packs? And if so, how do you keep those in sterile storage? I'm thinking particularly in the back of my mind, some very creative, we'll call them creative ways of storing these things, up to including like binder clips or using a hole punch to punch a hole through the end of the peel pack, not inside the seal, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah. Like how have you solved that problem?
So I that's one of the fun challenges I'm still working out. No, because I have such a large use of robotic arms, I hang mine, housing down, distal tip up. I do use a adhesive little sticky hook. They're plastic. They sit where the seal is on a peel pack pouch. They are peel packed, and I do use a very hefty peel pack. Ideally, they should be horizontal in a rack. That's what I'm moving to next. But currently they do hang just as long as your housing is pointed down and your distal tip is up. I have not seen any damage of anything like that, but it's, do I hang? Do I store them? It's better to store them flat. They need to be horizontal. It's just, you're going to lose space, but it's going to protect everything, holes, you name it. So I'm moving to that next level right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think everybody's trying to figure it out. So I just wanted to know where you guys were going with it. All right, last question. I'm going to give you the final word here. So this season is all about, little knowledge gaps and, SPD facts, similar to that 10x magnification that you called out. Is there any one thing that you would want to make sure every sterile processing department should know about processing robotics instruments, or maybe a department that's about to start processing robotics? Like what's one important thing you want them to take away about this episode?
Space. You need to have space. You need to make sure you have the proper equipment and then the space. It's amazing how much space robotic instrumentation takes up. You look at it as it's a tray. No, it's a very large tray. I think it's a 26-inch container. You got to have the right equipment. You have to have the right space, and you have to be involved. The minute you hear robotic, SPD should be at that table, because if you're not, you're going to miss out on a lot of things, and then everybody's going to be backpedaling, which then your surgeons will be upset.
Yeah. Well said. Thanks for walking us through your reprocessing program, talking about robotics today, Jamie. I'm sure that there are a lot of hot topics that I didn't think to ask you of that folks are going to want to continue this conversation on. So I would encourage you out there, if you've got a robotics question, go ahead and hit up Jamie the Robotics Whisperer on LinkedIn, Jaime Amaya on LinkedIn, and continue that conversation there. Jamie, I'm looking forward to having you back on episode 2 as on this side of the microphone as we continue through this season. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
that was Jaime Amaya, Sterile Processing and High-Level Disinfection Manager out in California. From horse enthusiast all the way to robot whisperer today. I feel like we got a great introduction to Jaime, and thankful for that walkthrough about robotic instrument reprocessing. It's something that's just getting more and more important and more prevalent in our industry. So we need to be thinking about these things and how to do it safely. And I hope it was a helpful introduction to this season as we're looking at some of those lesser known and commonly overlooked knowledge bits and knowledge gaps. Things just like that 10x magnification piece. That's something very small, very subtle, simple. You think we've got lighted magnification, but if you look at the IFU, maybe you're being asked to have that 10x magnification. Go check your magnifiers. Make sure that you've got it covered. The other one that I wanted to circle back around to was that insulation testing conversation that we had, because these robotic instruments, many of them are they're designed with a thick insulation, and they're only intended to be used for so many uses, right? And so perhaps the risk of the insulation failing is lower. But if you look at the FDA MOD database around device failures and look for robotic instruments, you will find examples of electrosurgical burns that happened because of insulation failure in robotic instruments. And so it is a real patient risk. There is something that we need to do about it. So I just want to urge you to read through your IFU, talk to your rep about what you need to do for inspecting that insulation. If the answer is have 10x magnification to look carefully along the insulation for signs of nicks and damage, then do that. But also get some clarity about what kinds of nicks and damage to be looking for and when to reject an instrument. And if there is some degree of higher insulation testing that you can do with an insulation tester and it's compatible with the instrument and it's part of the validated reprocessing, then definitely be doing that, right? Because we want to make sure that we can provide these instruments safe, for use. These surgeons are using these robots because they want to have a better outcome for their patients. So let's not have instruments that have leaky insulation and end up causing a patient burn along the way. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. Again, I hope this was a helpful intro to the season SPD Fact Check. We'll be back with Jaime as co-host as we continue to uncover some knowledge gaps in the industry. Until we talk to you next time, though, on behalf of Jaime, myself, and the whole team over at Beyond Clean, keep fighting dirty.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.